With great power comes great responsibility.
Compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right, even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
Never step onto the battlefield of ideas unprepared. Before you enter the fray, you need a plan. And there's no better place to get one than right here on Tactics with host Caleb Colquitt. The Situation Room goes live now on News Radio 1440.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for being with us here on Tactics. We appreciate you joining us in the Situation Room, whether you're doing so through YouTube or Facebook Live or Twitter or Twitch or Periscope, however you found us, however you just stumbled upon the greatest podcast of all time. It's a little optimistic for tonight's broadcast, but however you got to us, we certainly thank you for being here. We'd like to welcome all of our fans and the people that used to listen to us on the radio. We'd also like to welcome Jeff, the NSA agent that is assigned to listen to this program. Hi, Jeff. Say hi to the family for me. But anyway, we do appreciate you being here with us on Tactics, where speech isn't violence, tolerance isn't love, and disagreement isn't hate. Now, we're actually going to, and this will be made clear a little later in the program. Normally, the axiom, the idea out of those three that we talk about most prominently is that disagreement isn't hate. We're actually going to spend a fair amount of time talking tonight, I would even say the majority of our time, talking about how tolerance isn't love. The important thing to understand with that, and I'm not going to go into an entire sermon on that topic, even though I could, the reason that it's important to understand that tolerance isn't love is that tolerance is actually a lower form. It's a lower calling. To tolerate a person means I really don't care much about you one way or the other. I don't hate you, but I also don't love you. To tolerate someone just means that you exist without trying to do harm to them in some way. To love somebody means that you do the hard things, make the hard decisions. Sometimes that love looks like an arm around a friend when they need comfort, to cry with people that are mourning, to laugh with them when they're joyful. Sometimes, and I would even say more often than not, that's what love looks like. There are, however, times where love looks like the exact opposite. When somebody has made an error so egregious that you have to call them out on that, that's what makes love different than tolerance. Tolerance, in many ways, can be completely apathetic. It can not care about the other person or their well-being as long as they don't bring harm to me. I'm not going to bring harm to them. That's what tolerance is. And tolerance is a good thing, by the way. I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying that people always talk about tolerance, tolerance, tolerance. Well, tolerance is the lower form, the lower calling. Even people that are not necessarily good people, but aren't really bad either, they typically fall into the tolerance umbrella. To love someone is a self-sacrificing lifestyle. And sometimes that love means doling out punishment or seeing justice done. And that's really where our story starts out tonight. Because there is a woman who is a native of the state of Alabama who is in need of both mercy and justice. And I really want to believe that she is maybe not necessarily deserving of the mercy, but ready to receive it. But I don't know if she actually is or not. We're going to operate under the assumption that she is. And it'll be a little bit clearer once I give you some details. So essentially, this woman that we're talking about joined ISIS. So went overseas, joined a terrorist organization. And by the way, she is not an American citizen. And regardless of how you feel about her, regardless of how you feel about this story, regardless of how you feel about immigration, naturalization laws, that should really play no bearing on where your decision making lies. And it may even be different than mine. I'm just saying that those things should not necessarily be factors in how you understand the story, because she is not an American citizen by anybody's definition. Her name is Hoda Muhana, I believe, is the Muthana. Muthana, that's it. It's got that th sound in it. And what happened is she, at a very young age, withdrew from college and left the state of Alabama to go to Syria so that she could work for ISIS. And there's a number of different things that she was involved in her work with ISIS, which included calling on Muslims in America to do drive-by shootings and kill innocent people as they were going by them. She has also made a call for assassinations of the president, which at the time would have been President Barack Obama. So just to show you that there's not any political slant here, I mean, she was somebody that specifically advocated for killing President Obama. And so this is really not a right or left story. But she has since then apologized and requested re-entry into the United States, which has been the source of a lot of back and forth, a lot of debate. There's been a lot of heat, not so much light, because a lot of people are kind of ignorant on the details and they're debating things that really don't make a difference. And here's what I mean by this, because now she has a 2-year-old son, which she had by an ISIS terrorist, but that's not the child's fault. He's 2 years old now, and his father died in battle. He was an ISIS, I don't know exactly what kind of stuff he did with ISIS, what kind of terrorism he was involved in, but regardless, he's no longer in the picture, so now it's just her and her 2-year-old son. But once you understand the details of the story and how we arrived here, I think that you'll have a much clearer understanding, whether you're on the right or the left, regardless of what your preconceived notions may have been coming into this story. It really changes, because a lot of people are saying that the reason that she is no longer a United States citizen is because of her engaging in these terrorist activities with ISIS. That is actually not true. On Thursday, a federal judge ruled that Hoda Muthana cannot return to the States, and this was Judge Reggie Walton. He ruled that she and her son are not United States citizens, which is the reason that she is not able to return to the United States. Now, presumably, based on what I'm reading here, it is not as though she has been banned from the United States. It is merely that she has a passport that is not valid because she does not retain United States citizenship. So presumably, if she desired to, she is a refugee living in a Syrian refugee camp. Presumably, if she wanted to, she could file under, I guess, Yemen, and we'll explain why. I believe she's actually a citizen of the country of Yemen. She could apply for a passport there and try to get in on a U.S. visa that way, but she could not return to the United States as a citizen because the judge ruled that she had never had citizenship. It is not as though he's ruling that she lost her citizenship because of what she did overseas. She never had it to begin with, and that was where his ruling came into place. So she did not lose her United States citizenship on grounds of her behavior, just because of her backstory. So her father was a diplomat of the country of Yemen, not a United States citizen when she was born in 1994. And if you're reading the law, there is a specific carve-out for those born on United States soil that are the children of diplomats. Now, there's no sense in getting into, because it's beyond the scope of this story, the whole anchor baby debate and whether or not a person born here is just automatically a citizen, but that's really not up for debate, because there is a specific carve-out that specifically says diplomats are not going to be considered citizens of the United States. That's actually a part of federal law. So regardless of where you stand on the anchor baby debate, in other words, babies born in the United States but their parents are not U.S. citizens, I have a stance on it, but that's a discussion for another time. That really bears no importance whatsoever to this story. This woman, by every definition that we can find, is not a United States citizen. She was born here, but she was born as the children of diplomats, and that specifically is carved out as somebody that does not become a United States citizen by birth. The judge also ruled, and this is the more interesting part to me personally, the judge also ruled that her father could not support her without being considered a terrorist supporter. Now, I think that this is a little too heavy-handed. And I know that there may be other opinions on that. I think that there's a good debate to be had, and there are good points on both sides. I personally think it's too heavy-handed, and this is why. If she were still engaging in terrorist activities, then I can totally see that. But this is a father that wants to give support monetarily to his daughter and his grandson. The grandson has done nothing wrong. He's 2 years old. He doesn't even know what a terrorist is. Not old enough to engage in any of that. And now he's saying that if that father sends aid to her, even though she is currently living in a refugee camp, then he's basically considered a terrorist conspirer. I think that's incorrect. I think that if she were still working for ISIS, okay, yeah, I see where you're coming from there. You hate it for the kid, but if that money is going directly into the coffers of ISIS and being used to take American lives and the lives of other people fighting abroad, fighting against ISIS, totally understand where you're coming from. And as much as you hate that situation, the person should not have put themselves into that situation in the first place. But I think that this is a little too heavy-handed, because even if she really is secretly still working for ISIS somehow, and I don't know how you could prove that she is, I don't think you can make the case that the father is intentionally and willingly aiding and abetting the enemies of the United States of America by wanting to monetarily support his daughter and his grandson, who is repentant of what she's done. Now, here's the other side of that, because I think that that's really where mercy comes into place. But mercy needs to be mixed with justice. I do want to help the kid out if possible, even though the kid is not a United States citizen. Remember, I'm somebody that has raised money for and given my own money to charities that support these refugee camps and relocates Christians and other, Muslims that aren't Muslim enough and other people being persecuted by ISIS to other countries. So I'm sympathetic to the cause, and especially to this kid who has done nothing wrong. He didn't choose his circumstances in life. But when it comes to the mother, just because she is repentant, and she may genuinely be, we're going to operate under the assumption that she really does see the error of her ways. She really doesn't want to be a member of ICE. There was a quote in this story that I was reading about her on Fox News, on FoxNews.com, where she said that I don't even care if I get back into the United States and they revoke my passport and I never come back to the Middle East again. That's fine. I just want to be back in the United States. Here's the reason why I think that that's a bridge too far. Because they've already ruled that she's not a citizen. She would be essentially being fast-tracked en route back to the United States, where there are literally hundreds, thousands of people outside the United States trying to get in. And I'm not talking about illegal immigrants. I'm talking about people trying to do it the right way. I have friends, personally, outside the country that have had trouble getting into the United States on a visa. It's very hard to do. And it's even harder to do if you're not a tourist, if you're somebody that's actually trying to come here to stay. And she's wanting to get the most difficult visa that you can get, one that actually allows you to stay in the United States. She wants to get that and basically wants to be put at the front of the line in front of good, honest, hardworking people that have done nothing wrong. That is injustice. Here's what I think should actually happen. If she is serious about re-entering the United States, and I want to believe that she is, I want to assume that she is, she needs to turn herself over to American troops and to stand trial. Now, I don't know what the verdict would be. I don't know how that would be handled. But the idea that she should just be able to re-enter the United States and get to live here and get off scot-free for what she's done, no. That is injustice. If she wants to turn herself over to the court and have her son brought back over here to live with his granddaddy or with somebody else, another relative inside the United States, and then she wants to stand trial and answer for her crimes, I think that's acceptable. I think that is the merciful thing to do at this point. And whatever the jury, whether it be a military tribunal or a traditional court, I think that it would be more likely a military tribunal, probably in Guantanamo. That would be, I think, the most appropriate way to handle this. But she should have to answer for her crimes. I am a big believer in repentance. I am a big believer in second chances. And if she wants a second chance, that's fine. But part of when it comes to the second chance thing, I believe that once somebody has asked for forgiveness, the Christian thing to do is to forgive them. But there is a difference in Christian forgiveness and reconciliation with Jesus Christ, with the church, and I don't think that she's done any of that. To my knowledge, she's still a Muslim. I don't really know, to be honest. But there's a difference in that and having no earthly consequences for the things that you've done. Perfect example of this, and I could rattle off half a dozen here, but one of the more popular ones that a lot of people will know is the story of David and Bathsheba. Now, once David realized the sin that he had committed with Bathsheba, he immediately repented and right away, with no hesitation, goes into the temple to pray to God, fast, has not had food in days and days, and literally spends days on end in prayer, in repentance. David was serious. He was sincere. He was repentant. And God did forgive him for that. However, his son still died. His infant son still lost his life. And that was part of God's punishment for David committing this great sin and murdering Uriah. So I'm all in favor of repentance. Repentance is a wonderful thing. Lord knows that I've had to do it quite a bit in my day. And if it weren't for repentance, I would not be here standing before you right now. I firmly believe that. All I'm saying is repentance and forgiveness are not the same thing as justice being doled out. Forgiveness is something that we are called to do, but justice is also something we're called to uphold. And I think that this woman should have to face that justice. And if she is responsible enough to answer for her crimes and to, throw herself on the mercy of the court, whatever the court decides she's willing to do, then yeah, have at it. I think that that's the right. I don't think that she should be shot on side as though she's a dangerous terrorist still. But she also shouldn't just get off scot-free. That would be a massive miscarriage of justice. And that's true no matter where she's from. All right, so another story that I wanted to talk about locally, this is kind of a continuation. So the Trump baby balloon group, they have gone after GoFundMe. So for those of you who don't know, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, there was the big Alabama LSU game, and Donald Trump was in attendance. There was some idiotic group that went out, and they have this giant baby Trump balloon. I'm sure 99% of you have heard this story. So some guy walks by and slashes the balloon with like a pocket knife or a box cutter or something like that. Anyway, slashes the balloon, tears it up. And GoFundMe, there was a GoFundMe that was started directly after that to pay the guy's bill and take care of his legal fees, which at the time, you can go back and look at my coverage of it, I said that was stupid. I was very critical of it. Now the group that brought the balloon is saying that GoFundMe, they have some kind of suit against GoFundMe and want them to pull the guy's funding and not allow him to do this because they're basically enticing violence. So I'll just read their words. Their attorney, Gautam Joyce, he said, quote, "If people can use GoFundMe to finance acts of hate and violence, the company will set a dangerous precedent, and the risk of a copycat crimes will put peaceful protesters in harm's way." And what's really bothersome to me is this account now has $47,000 in it. Now, I agree with the synopsis by the group's lawyer. I don't know from a legal standpoint, because remember, I'm not an attorney, but from a legal standpoint, I do understand what he's saying. If people start seeing, oh, well, I can just silence the speech of people I don't like, and I'll just get a GoFundMe and I won't have to pay any penalty for doing whatever it was that I did. Like I made this analogy when this story first broke. The guy popping the Trump balloon is absolutely no different than Antifa running around and taking MAGA hats off of people's heads and burning them, which has happened before multiple times. Or the punk in Whataburger that saw Make America Great Again hat and snatched it off the guy's head and threw a drink in his face. Now, like I said, that's assault and stealing property, but the theft of the property itself, the taking of the MAGA hat and trying to destroy it, that's exactly the same thing. There's no difference here. And with this GoFundMe argument, if people think, well, I can just go and slash the Trump baby balloon and I don't have to worry about it because GoFundMe will be able to bail me out with a whole bunch of people that support Trump. The guy has a point. If people start thinking that they can do that and get away with it, that is going to embolden political dissidents that think that they can just get away with acts of violence and property destruction because the people at GoFundMe are going that happen to politically agree with them are going to bail them out. I think he's right on this. I think that analysis is actually pretty spot on. I hate that, but it's the truth. And when it comes to the guys that actually raised money for this man, $47,000, here's what I want to ask you. How many pro-life causes could that have funded? Different charities that are specifically aimed at helping mothers in crisis, setting up crisis pregnancy centers, helping them with food and rent and things where the mother feels like she can't afford the baby, which, by the way, is one of the primary reasons that women abort is because of economic reasons. It's not the primary one. The primary one is actually convenience. But economic reasons is one of the top ones. And so how many children could that money maybe have even saved if it had been put towards a cause like that instead of funding this thug that decides that he can go around and destroy people's property because it triggers him? I mean, this guy is just a snowflake on the right. There's really no gentler way to put it. When liberals say that stuff like this is proof that people care more about Cheeto Jesus than they do actually helping people in need, they've got a point. Because $47,000 is a lot of money. How many hungry kids could that have fed? How many orphans and widows could we have helped out with that? I'm sorry, but the people that donated to this, I don't like telling people what to do with their own money, but this was a horribly bad idea. I mean, there are 1,000 other charities that are more, and I don't even consider this as charity. This is just basically financing crime. But I'm sorry, if you gave money to this, I don't even know what to say to you. This is absurdly ridiculous. And essentially what this, you can see all my coverage on this and see my full thoughts on the action itself on one of my past episodes. I want to say it was maybe Tuesday or Thursday. I think it was Tuesday that I went over this. But anyway, if you're giving money to this, it proves that you care far more about giving homage and tithe to Cheeto Jesus than you do actually doing the work of the real Jesus Christ. It's a sign that you have made Donald Trump such an idol in your mind that you will finance the blasphemers even if they break God's law to do it. I think you have to do some real soul searching if you're one of these people. And I just don't see it as any different as when people on the left try to bankroll thugs in Antifa that smash in store windows and steal things from people and beat up people. Now, beating up people is obviously a little worse because there's an actual person that got hurt. But you see what I'm saying? When they commit crimes and there are people on the left that think, well, they were hurting conservatives, so good, I'm going to help pay their bill. I don't see this as any different. You're just financing crime. I don't know if legally going after GoFundMe, the company that allows this to happen, is the right way to do it. But I tell you that if I was running the company, GoFundMe, you better believe I'd be pulling that account. any account that finances a criminal that has, done something like this where it's blatant, they've talked about it, they've admitted to it, they've confessed to it, I wouldn't allow that to stand. And I find myself at odds with somebody that I almost never find myself disagreeing with. So this is a tweet from Mo Brooks, our representative from the great state of Alabama. My favorite representative in our state, actually. Mo Brooks saying, in Tuscaloosa, Hoyt Hutchinson pops a baby Trump balloon. I believe in law and order, so Hutchinson should be prosecuted as the law requires. I believe in America, so afterwards Hutchinson should be given a patriotism medal for fighting evil socialism at real Donald Trump, #impeachment. Now, it is very, very rare that I find myself disagreeing with Mo Brooks. He's by far my favorite congressperson, and yes, I'm counting senators, representatives, by far, from the state of Alabama. I do like Gary Palmer. I think he's about on par with Mo Brooks, but the point is, Mo Brooks and I are usually almost 100% on the same page. I'm really surprised that we're so far apart on this one. Now, granted, he did give a caveat that he does believe in the rule of law and he thinks this guy should be prosecuted, but silencing political speech that you disagree with, there's nothing less American than that. And if Mo Brooks were here right now in studio, which, by the way, he's welcome to come on the show anytime. I'm always happy to hear from him. I'm always happy to do an interview with him. But if Mo Brooks were to come on the program right now, I'd tell him, I'm sorry, I think you're dead wrong on this one. And when it comes to this, there is nothing less patriotic than silencing the speech of those with whom you disagree. And that's exactly what this thug was doing. He just decided, well, the Trump baby balloon angers me, therefore I'm going to pop it. And another thing that brings me back to it, he says that this is fighting evil socialism. Please explain to me, Representative Brooks, how? How is this fighting socialism? Is there anybody that was seeing the Trump baby balloon and automatically saying, you know what, I was a capitalist this morning, but since they've got a giant Trump baby balloon, I guess I'll be a socialist now? That's not how people operate. There was nobody that the Trump baby balloon was hurting or helping. It was dumb. It's disrespectful. I don't like it. But it's not as though the existence of the Trump baby balloon where people could see it was furthering socialism. I'm sorry, but that's just ridiculous. I don't... If this had been a giant sign that had a swastika or a sickle and hammer on it, and he had done the same thing, if it was a big swastika balloon or sickle and hammer balloon and he popped it, granted, at least I disagree with them even more on that, but that's still not a patriotic thing to do, to silence the speech of those around you. And that you could at least make the argument that it's furthering the cause of socialism. I don't see how you can do that with the Trump baby balloon. Now, Tuberville also invited him out to tailgate with him at Auburn versus Georgia. But with Mo or with Tuberville, I'm sorry, if you treat this guy like a hero, you have absolutely no business criticizing Antifa's vandalism. You just don't. I don't see how you could make the case that Antifa's vandalism, that's bad. But this guy doing exactly the same thing to his political opponents, people with whom he disagrees with, that's okay. I'm sorry, I can't buy that. And so far as I can tell, once you've done that, you have then lost all credibility to oppose Antifa or oppose their tactics, as it were. I don't think that you can legitimately criticize them for their tactics after that. What bothers me the most about this is this obsessive Trump worship, to where he's basically a god, and if you blaspheme him by making fun of him with a giant balloon depicting him as a child, that you must be punished, and we can just throw the laws out the window, whatever it takes to take down the people that are blaspheming our god, Donald Trump. That is far more harmful to the country than a balloon making fun of the president. Like I said at the beginning, disrespectful, don't like it, wish that they wouldn't do it. I think that the people that are doing it are idiots. But they're not doing any harm to the country by doing that. I worry about the spiritual well-being of the country if we're to the point to where we can say, no, if you make fun of somebody, we'll bring you down and laws don't matter. That's not okay. And I do worry that there is a significant portion, I wouldn't say a majority, I'm not saying that all Republicans or all people that voted for Trump are like this, so don't take me out of context. But I am genuinely worried that there is a significant part of the population, both in my home state and in the country abroad. I am genuinely worried that that sickness has penetrated the church, and that a lot of them are far more willing to go to the mat for Donald Trump than they are the truth of the gospel. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in just a moment on tactics.
Hey, where you going? Champ? Slugger? Hey, cowboy. Where you going? Where you going?
I'm going out!
Hey everybody, heading south on I-65 between Huntsville and Birmingham, and a thought struck me. I was reading the other night from the Gospel of Matthew, the story where Jesus walks on the water and then Peter requests that Christ let him come out on the water too, and to come towards him. And it's a story that I'm sure most of us are familiar with. The Apostle Peter steps out onto the water, a very bold thing to do, and then all of a sudden he starts getting distracted by the storm that is going on. There's wind, there's waves, there's rain, and he starts looking to the right and the left and seeing how turbulent the sea is, and he takes his eyes off of Christ, and immediately he starts sinking into the water. And I think that says a lot about the way that we're supposed to look at Christ in our life. Everybody has storms. I don't care who you are, I don't care what kind of life that you live, whether you're rich or you're poor, you live in the country, live in the city, whether you've got a lot of family, whether you have virtually no family, everybody's got storms. Everybody has things in their life that just don't go their way. Things that they have to deal with, whether it's money, whether it's sickness. Something happens to everybody on a pretty regular basis. And I think that where we start going wrong, where we start sinking, is when we start focusing on the waves, we start focusing on the rain, we start focusing on the storms in our life, rather than looking forward at Christ. Now, Peter already knew that the sea was stormy. He was in a boat. He was very aware of the fact that the storm was raging pretty heavy at that point. So, what happened? He started out right, and then when he stopped focusing on Christ and started focusing on the terrible things going on around him, when he started focusing on them and that became the focus, he became afraid and he started sinking. And that's kind of like driving in a lot of ways. If you focus too much on the storm, if you focus on what's going on around you, if you focus too much on the other cars or start looking behind you and worrying about that, then you're going to lose focus on your goal, and you're either going to go in the wrong direction or, unfortunately, much worse, you wind up wrecking. That's obviously not good. And so, just like Peter, I think that the point of that story is that we have to keep our eyes constantly focused on Christ. Are we aware of the storm? Sure. Do we do the best that we can to deal with the circumstances of our life? Absolutely. That's something that the Bible really helps us with. But there's a difference in being aware of the storm and doing something to deal with the storm and focusing on the storm. We focus on Christ. And if we focus on Christ, we have faith in Him that, yes, the storm is there. Yes, we know it's there. But that whatever the storm happens to throw at us, it'll be okay because our focus is on Christ. It's a question of our priorities, and it's also a question of, do you trust God enough to bring you through the storm? And if the answer is yes, then all we have to do is look at Christ, keep ourselves focused on Him, and walk straight ahead. And that is going to be a much better way to live than constantly worrying about whatever new wave or whatever new rain or whatever new wind shows up in our life. Keep our eyes focused on Christ and walking forward so that one day we reach Him.
That was stupid.
I know it was stupid.
Really stupid.
Hey, I just said it was stupid.
Today's Daily Dose of Stupid, the subject of it is going to be somebody that I really didn't expect, and I really didn't expect it now. I wouldn't say that I thought it was impossible for this person, or this company rather, to be the spotlight of the Daily Dose of Stupid, but I thought that if it happened, it was a long ways off. I'm very sorry to announce Chick-fil-A has actually caved to the leftist mob. They announced earlier today that they will drastically restructure their charitable giving. And this is via story from BizNow. It's a business publication. And I'll just read a little segment of this article. As Chick-fil-A expands globally and into more liberal parts of the USA, the chicken chain plans to change which charities it donates to after years of bad press and protests from the LGBT community. Beginning next year, Chick-fil-A will move away from its current philanthropic structure. BizNow has learned, after donating to more than 300 charitable organizations this year, the Atlanta-based fast food chain will instead focus on 3 initiatives with one accompanying charity each: education, homelessness, and hunger. Now, in case you are sitting there and thinking, maybe Caleb's blowing this out of proportion, and they just happen to be restructuring, and they're just going to do their own charities as opposed to giving to other groups, and so it's just a coincidence that their charitable giving is no longer going to include groups that have views on marriage, traditional Christian views on marriage, that kind of thing. In case you thought that was just a coincidence, here's another quote from that same article from the Chick-fil-A president. That's pretty good. The Chick-fil-A president and chief operating officer, Tim Tassopoulos. Quote, "There's no question we know that, and as we go into new markets, we need to be clear about who we are. There are lots of articles and newscasts about Chick-fil-A, and we thought you needed to be clear about our message." So in other words, they're absolutely caving to the leftist media mob. He's saying, look, Chick-fil-A's on too many broadcasts, too many webcasts, and as we're expanding into new markets, we've decided we need to drastically reshape our image, and people need to know about who we are and our message. So yes, they're absolutely caving to the leftist mob. There's the president and chief operating officer admitting to it in front of God and the entire world. So the idea that maybe this was just a funny coincidence and they just weren't doing it specifically to appease the outrage mob on Twitter, no, that's exactly what they're doing, and they're admitting to it right here. To understand a little bit of the background on this and where all this comes from, because everybody knows that they really got thrust into the middle of this debate after comments from their founder and CEO, Dan Cathy, who has now passed away. But the source of consternation now, because even after he passed, there were LGBT groups protesting and angry about Chick-fil-A, and they still continue to boycott it even though he's gone. He's not overseeing the company anymore. The way that they explained that is, well, they're giving money to gay hate groups, which is absurd on a number of levels, but the hate groups that they were specifically citing were 3 of them. They were the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, the high school organization that works with Christian athletes in high schools. You also had the Salvation Army. Everybody knows them. And then a more local one, Paul Anderson Youth Home. So just so you understand exactly how Chick-fil-A was giving and what organizations that they were giving to and what they were doing, the specific program that they were giving to FCA, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, it was not for members only. Now, every member of the Fellowship of Christian Athletes has to sign a pledge, which says, among other things, that they will not practice homosexuality. But the thing is, it doesn't just include homosexuality, it also includes all sex outside of marriage. So the idea that they were specifically targeting gays and saying, no, just gays can't be members, well, yes, that was part of it, But you also have to understand that they have a certain moral standard that is to be upheld, and it is Bible-based. I mean, that's kind of in the name, Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And so they did exclude those that were that practiced homosexuality, but they also excluded people that slept around before they were married. That kind of thing. So it's not as though it's just specifically that. And the program that Chick-fil-A was giving money to, that FCA facilitates, you don't have to be a member to participate. This was money going to education that you could be gay and get this money. Yeah, you could benefit from the program that Chick-fil-A was giving to regardless of your religious beliefs or your sexuality. Now, the second one that they were talking about was the Salvation Army. Now, the Salvation Army does espouse traditional beliefs when it comes to marriage and sexuality. Orthodox Christian beliefs that have stood for, 2,000 years. You'll notice that there's a lot of disagreements amongst Christians on different doctrinal issues. Never once in the history of the church, the 2,000 years since Jesus Christ died, and I'm talking about the church at large, I'm talking about everybody under the Christian umbrella, every single person. We've never fought about whether or not God allows homosexuality or not. That's never even been up for debate. At no point in the church's history were they like, you know what, maybe God is okay with homosexuality. No, that's never been debated because it's so crystal clear in the scriptures that that is not something that is open for discussion. There's a lot of things that people disagree with, and there's a lot of arguments that I can look at and say, you know what, the other side has some good points. This is not one of them. There is absolutely no way that you can look at the scripture, look at God's word, and say, yeah, you can be a Christian and also be in favor of homosexuality. I'm sorry, you can't do it. And that's the same stance that the Salvation Army takes on this. But it's not as though the Salvation Army is passing out food in a disaster area and goes, all right, here's your meal, wait a second, are you gay? Well, we're going to have to just not give you a meal. They don't do that. And shouldn't do that. If they did do that, I would have problems with them. For the same reason that Jesus didn't just go to talk to the pure people or the religious leaders of the times. Jesus was around tax collectors, and I love that tax collectors is lumped in with sinners, but in the Bible, tax collectors, sinners, prostitutes, I mean, every nasty job, every person that would be of ill repute that civilized people wouldn't want to be around, you would think of, that's who Jesus was with constantly. And so if the Salvation Army turned up their nose at gay people and said, well, we're not going to help you, well, yeah, they would be in direct violation of the Christian ideal. But they espouse traditional Christian beliefs and teach Christian beliefs, but also help everybody that comes up and wants aid. And so I don't understand how the Salvation Army is a gay hate group. Now, personally, I don't give to the Salvation Army. And it's not because I don't think that they do good work, and it's not that I hate them. I just like to give to charities that work within my own church, and I have some doctrinal disagreements with what the Salvation Army does. Still think that they're a good charity, still wouldn't begrudge a Christian that gave money to them to help people out. And if Chick-fil-A was like, you know what, there's some doctrinal issues that we have with the Salvation Army, and we just decided that we're going to part ways. Okay, I would 100% be on board with that. Heck, if the Salvation Army was doing the crazy hypothetical that I just said, that they weren't giving money to gay people, or they weren't giving some kind of humanitarian aid to gay people, they were screening people and only giving it to straight people, you know what? If Chick-fil-A bailed out on them because of that, I would say, I kind of see where they're coming from. That's not what's going on here. Chick-fil-A specifically pulled out of donating to them and helping them because it was making leftist and Marxist on Twitter angry. And they straight up caved. Now, the final charity is much more local. They don't give nearly as much money to them. But it's a youth home that has traditional Christian ideals. They teach the boys, the orphans, and the foster kids that are in their care, in their charge. They do teach them about the Bible, but it's not as though they kick gay kids out on the street and wouldn't help them, or at least not so far as I know. And so I don't understand why the left believes that Chick-fil-A giving money to these 3 charities is in any way harming gay people. I can't tell you the dozens and dozens of comments I went through on Twitter today, and they were saying, well, it's because Chick-fil-A is giving money that hurts gay people. How is this hurting gay people? Please explain to me how any of these 3 charities, in any way, directly or indirectly, is hurting gay people. Feel free to leave that in the comment section under the video. Maybe you can do it, but if there is, I'm not aware of it. And I don't understand why people take this stance on it. But here's really the takeaway from this, and I'm going to go into depth on this. First of all, we got 2 perspectives, the moral perspective and the economic perspective. I'm going to give you the moral first because it's more important. The truth is, this is sheer moral cowardice. There's no way to sugarcoat it. They were doing something good. They were doing something positive. They were doing something to help their fellow man, and they decided to stop because there were a whole bunch of people on the left that didn't like it. There was no standing up for their ideals. Look, before this, Chick-fil-A has just always kind of silently maintained that they don't really take as much of a political stance on it. They just kind of give to everybody. And I was fine with that. I was fine with them not getting out and beating the drum for that, because that's not what they're supposed to be. They're a freaking chicken sandwich restaurant. I mean, if their individual employees or their owners want to go out and talk about Jesus Christ, more power to them. Bless them for doing it. But I don't really see it as the responsibility of a chicken restaurant to do that. And they have really, for the most part, stayed out of the political spotlight. I mean, I know that they've been the source of a lot of the controversy, but they didn't really answer it in any meaningful way or try to, browbeat people or anything like that. But now they're caving. Which makes me rethink maybe the reason that they didn't do that is not because they were trying to show the love of Christ by taking the persecution and just not saying anything about it. I think that it proves that at least the people that are in there now are moral cowards. That they now refuse to do the right thing. And because of that, they're now coming out saying that that's actually the reason that they're not doing it. It's not the dropping of the support itself that bothers me. It's the rationale. It's the reason that they did it. That's what gets under my skin. And what is so astounding about this on the moral side of things is that they had already won the fight. They'd already won. They didn't even have to cave. Like, it would be one thing if they were almost bankrupt from the boycotts and they said, you know what, the boycotts are killing us. We're going to cease to exist if we don't do something about it. So, you know what, we're just going to go ahead. We'll just go ahead and cave. But they were successful. They were winning the fight. They had already beaten this. Just to illustrate my point here. They were voted the best fast food restaurant in America, America's favorite fast food restaurant, barely edging out In-N-Out Burger, which had won for the past 3 years, which, by the way, is another Christian organization, another Christian company. Which to me ought to be a pretty strong indication that maybe doing things the Christian way, espousing Christian values and expecting your employees and the people in your company's family to operate under a certain list of moral principles, maybe that's a good thing and maybe that really does work. You would think that would have been the takeaway from it, but no, Chick-fil-A does this. And even though they are currently the reigning champion of America's favorite fast food restaurant, they're like, you know what, we got to cave. There's just not enough people that like us. What are you talking about? You're the most popular restaurant in the country, man. You don't have anywhere else to go. And when it comes to their profit margin, they're currently the 3rd most profitable fast food chain in the country. The only ones ahead of them are McDonald's and Subway. And I'm just sitting here thinking, really? You want to catch up to Subway and McDonald's that badly? Subway and McDonald's have been around for a really long time. Think about how much brand name recognition they have. Chick-fil-A is punching way above its weight, especially when you consider how recent their development is compared to Subway and McDonald's and the infrastructure that McDonald's and Subway has compared to Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is not even a restaurant that's in every town like the two of them are. And yet they're still the third most profitable in the country. And here's another thing, and this is why I say that they've already won the fight. The free market was already working its magic. They were espousing traditional values. They're even closed on Sunday, and they were the most trendy, most popular new upcoming fast food chain in freaking Manhattan. Even people in Manhattan that may not agree with their personal politics are like, you know what? I like the waffle fries. I like the chicken sandwich. And that's okay. In fact, that's a good thing. That's what tolerance is. It's not quite to the level of love like we started out with the show. But the tolerance itself was a good thing. They had already won the fight. They had already proven that they could be profitable and even wealthy, doing things the right way, doing things the Christian way, and still espousing those values, holding on to them, but just giving people good service and taking care of people and letting that being sort of their guiding principle. They proved that regardless of the outrage mob on Twitter, they could still do it. And they just caved after they had already won the fight. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's almost like scoring a touchdown, and you're already ahead by like 30 points at this point, and then just handing the ball to the other team and watching them run up the field and giving the game away. It's like, I don't know, being ahead by 40 at halftime, and then the team just refuses to take the field after halftime, just lets the other team do whatever they want. It's one of the most bizarre moves I've ever seen. And I am predicting that they will be open on Sundays by 2021. It seems to me, based on this move, and I could be wrong, but within a year, by 2021, you can mark my words on this, see if my prediction turns out to be true. They will be open on Sundays. They will be just another fast food restaurant, because getting rid of this is getting rid of the thing that made them special. Within a year, they'll just be another Burger King or another McDonald's. Just another company. And there's nothing wrong with being that per se, but you're not something that's unique. You're not something that sticks out in people's minds. You're not a brand that is a shining example for people. Do you know of anybody that like really super loves McDonald's? There's a lot of people that eat there because it's cheap. There's a lot of people that eat there because their kids want to go there, every once in a while. But it's not a brand name that people think of and immediately you have something conjured up in their mind of some kind of fond memory, like it is with Chick-fil-A or a lot of other fast food restaurants. I mean, you know what you're getting when you go to McDonald's? You're getting a crappy hamburger. And it's safe and it's reliable and there's one on every street corner and that's why you go there. But Chick-fil-A was different. Chick-fil-A was unique and they are losing that. But, I mean, really we shouldn't be surprised. We shouldn't really be surprised. Because that's the way the world works. Once something gets big and successful, it kind of goes the way of trying to fit in with the world. And unfortunately, it looks like Chick-fil-A has been the latest victim of that. Now, I will say this too. I don't think that they're going to go belly up. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, well, this is going to destroy Chick-fil-A's business. They're no longer going to. No, there's still going to be people right and left that just like the chicken sandwiches. They like the waffle fries. And I don't blame them on the waffle fries. I think the waffle fries are delicious. But anyway, like they're just going to like the food and they're going to go there because of that. Once that Christian foundation is gone, though, the thing that made them special, the thing that made them unique and different, and the reason that they had hordes of conservatives and Christians and evangelicals that were willing to go to the mat for them. I mean, you think about the Chick-fil-A day we had a few years ago where people on the left started attacking Kathy, the founder, for what he said, and Christians came out in droves and shows of support. That kind of spirit is just not going to be there anymore. There are not going to be people that are willing to go to the mat over a chicken sandwich. Now, they'll do it over a chicken sandwich and the company actually means something, but they're not going to do it just because. They don't like the waffle fries that much. And so you're going to have a completely different spirit leading this company if that's the case. A completely different feel and culture that surrounds it. And another thing, too, you're going to get some blowback because there are going to be Christians that feel betrayed by this. Now, I expected Chick-fil-A would do this at some point. I didn't think it would be this soon, honestly. I figured that they still had probably another 2 or 3 good years left. But there are going to be a lot of Christians that didn't see this coming that are going to feel betrayed. And some of them are probably just not going to be going to Chick-fil-A all that often. It would not surprise me in the least to know that. Now, I'm going to talk about it from the business perspective now. We're going to kind of transition into that because leave the moral behind. You could be the biggest pro-gay advocate there is and still look at the situation and say, this was an economically stupid decision. And I'll tell you why. I would tell you if I thought that this were a good decision from a PR standpoint. I would. Keep in mind, I'm a communication major, or was. That's what my degree is in. I studied public relations. That was part of my track. I would tell you if I thought that this was a good PR move, even if I disagreed with the decision that was made. Case in point, and it just so happens that Colin Kaepernick is back in the news, so I'm going to bring him up now. When Colin Kaepernick did that ad with Nike, there were a whole lot of conservatives that were getting on the internet saying, oh, this is a terrible decision. Nike's going to destroy their business. No, they didn't. And you'll remember that on the air, I remember very distinctly because it was a joint discussion that Joe Hunk and I had. We used to have a segment called Upon Further Review, which is where we used to talk sports and politics back and forth. He's the guy who hosts the Fallout on Sports Radio 740. Great show, by the way. Be sure to listen to it from 2 to 6 on our sister station. But anyway, Joe Hunk was in the studio with me, and we both agreed. And I didn't know where he was going. He didn't know where I was going. But basically, at the same time, we're like, oh, it's a brilliant economic move. Why? Because Nike knows its audience. Nike knew that primarily the people who buy their shoes are young, black, male athletes that have a political worldview similar to Colin Kaepernick's. And even the young black athletes that buy Nikes, even the ones that actually disagreed with the synopsis that Colin Kaepernick only got cut because he was causing, political upheaval, even the ones that were honest enough to say, no, he got cut because he's a crappy quarterback, even they like Colin Kaepernick and think that the team should have kept him on just as a political statement and paid him money just to basically be a professional political activist for the San Francisco 49ers. And they still think that even though he was not good as a quarterback, that the team should have kept him on just so he could continue his political activism. I know I've had these conversations with people. And Nike made a calculated but very wise risk. In other words, they knew that they were going to lose some customers that were older, more conservative. But the thing is, those people weren't buying Nikes in very big numbers anyway. And they knew that they were going to pick up at least a little business from people that were, white liberals that, just happened to want some Nikes, if nothing else, just to show their support. And so they knew that their audience, their primary audience, was going to be okay with that message and that they were going to lose a little bit of business, but they would actually make more money in the long run because there were going to be so many people in their primary audience that was going to like what they were saying. And they were right. Their stocks actually did way better after the Colin Kaepernick ad came out. And I predicted that. Chick-fil-A is going to have the exact opposite effect, and here's why. Their primary base are white Southerners, primarily evangelicals. Not all, but that's their primary audience. This is one of the dumbest things that they could have done because they are appealing to an audience of angry, outraged LGBT activists. If you count up all the gay people, that's about 5% of the population. And that 5% of the population, some of them live in the South, and the place where Chick-fil-A is headquarters. The vast majority of them don't. The vast majority of them live in other parts of the country where that is more acceptable. And you also have to consider that even if you're lumping in their families and everything else, those are typically not the people that, hey, let's go to the gay pride parade and right after we'll swing by and pick up some chicken nuggets. No, they're not going to do that. That's absurd. There might be a few, but what do you think is more likely to happen? A gay couple, Hans and Franz, we'll just use that they're swinging by the Chick-fil-A after the Pride Parade, or a family of 6, let's say a Catholic family of 6 that loves Chick-fil-A because of their traditional Christian stances and heads there after Mass. Which do you think is more likely to happen? And I had to use Catholics because they have Mass every day of the week. Evangelicals typically worship on Sunday. But you know what I'm saying? Like, I guess I could have used Wednesday night Bible study. But my point in all of that is they are alienating their primary base. There are few companies in the world that would suffer more from caving into the gay mob than Chick-fil-A. This is one of the dumbest economic decisions I've ever seen. Because, and here's another thing that you want to keep in mind. Let's just say that it weren't a numbers game. Let's say that there were just as many gays out there that wanted to eat chicken sandwiches as evangelicals. This would still be a losing gambit, and here's why. The gays are not going to welcome them with open arms now that they've done this. They're just not. And as proof of this, I want you to remember Brendan Eric, who he had to resign after giving money to support Proposition 8. You remember Proposition 8 out in California was the gay marriage thing, and Proposition 8 was trying to nix it, make gay marriage illegal in the state of California. Well, Brendan gave money to it. Now, he did this as a private citizen. It was not Mozilla Firefox that was giving money. It was not his company that was giving money. He was giving money, his personal money, to this cause. And the left would not relent until he had been fired. It wasn't enough that it was just personal money. They were boycotting Firefox until he was gone. People are going to do exactly the same thing with Chick-fil-A. The Cathy family, who is conservative and evangelical, still own Chick-fil-A. The leftist mob is not going to relent until they are gone. Now, I don't know if they're actually going to resign or not, but my point is, as long as they are still there, it does not matter what Chick-fil-A does. They still are not going to welcome Chick-fil-A with open arms. And that is a perfect example of why. The left just, they're not forgiving in nature. It is against their virtue to forgive. They don't believe in that. Forgiveness is a Christian virtue, not one of the left. And another example of that, since we used Colin Kaepernick, for those of you who don't know, he actually had a practice. The NFL set up a specific practice specifically for him, giving him all kinds of special treatment. They don't just set up practices for different NFL teams to come to for one person. They don't do that. But NFL is so determined to bend over backwards to prove that they're giving Colin Kaepernick a fair shake and tried to encourage as many teams as possible to come and take a look at him and see if any of them wanted to pick him up, that they hold a special practice specifically for him. They were accommodating him the way that they do not accommodate any other athlete in their league or potential athlete. And it got canceled. Not by the NFL, by Colin Kaepernick. Why did it get canceled? Because Colin Kaepernick was mad that the NFL did not allow him to bring his personal camera crew. This was about grandstanding. It was never about getting to play in the NFL. It was never about that. Because Colin Kaepernick wants to be able to play the victim, which is the reason that he brought the camera crew in the first place. It's the reason that he kneeled and protested on the NFL's property where he could play a victim. He wants to be a martyr. He wants to be able to play the victim card. That's the goal. The goal isn't to be a quarterback. That's the goal. And the left is exactly the same way. They're not going to forgive Chick-fil-A for the sin of supporting these charities that believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman and anything else is wrong. They're not going to do that. And to further prove my point, here are just some of the, and I really did just go through and pull some of the tweets that I saw. So here's just a sampling of them. We'll go through them very quickly. There they go. All right, so we've got one. It's about time. It's sad that you have to kick some people in the wallet to get them to be decent human beings. Another commentator. I commend Chick-fil-A for its change in donation policy. I've never eaten there, and I'm not likely to change that stance until I'm sure this new direction is not just marketing mumbo-jumbo. My family is too important to me, besides it's just chicken. All right, another one. To be clear, Chick-fil-A announced that they are no longer going to donate to anti-LGBTQ organizations, not because they now support the queer community, but because of bad press. Also, to be clear, they lied about this once before. All right, here's another few tweets. Now, this one is unique because it's the only one where the guy actually said that he would eat at Chick-fil-A. I can now buy Chick-fil-A with a good conscience. They are no longer donating to anti-LGBT groups. But I will point out that he's saying I can now buy with a good conscience, which implies what? He was actually already buying Chick-fil-A stuff. Now he just doesn't feel guilty about it. Somebody else. It's too late. Now it's too late. You really did try to fake it. Something inside has died and I can't hide it. I just can't eat this homophobic expletive. Another one. To right your past wrongs, you will now donate. Will you now donate to organizations that help LGBTQ people? Chick-fil-A. Told you, it's not enough. And we could go through dozens of these, but these are the last ones. I'm sorry, but if Chick-fil-A wants to remake a PR move to win back customers, they need to show that there is a LGBT representation among their execs and a significant financial donation to LGBT youth center organizations. They owe it for all the pain they've inflicted. Again, I haven't seen any pain that they've inflicted, but anyway. Another one. I'm happy Chick-fil-A has stopped donating to anti-LGBT causes, but it isn't enough to simply stop lighting fires. You need to actively repair damage by helping extinguish the ones that you've started. It's a step in the right direction, but there's still work to be done. And finally, okay, that's great, whatever. Chick-fil-A is no longer donating to homophobia and transphobia is fine, but they really about it. Apparently this guy can't spell or can't use grammar. They can donate that money to an LGBTQ plus communities and organizations. So that's just a sampling, and I get that Twitter doesn't represent everybody, but it does represent the activist wing of the left party that Chick-fil-A was trying to appease, because there's probably, I don't know if it's a majority, but there is a significant portion of gay people that eat at Chick-fil-A and they just don't make a big deal out of it. But those weren't the people that were going out and trashing Chick-fil-A in the first place. The activists that they were trying to appease is represented by Twitter. And the reason that this was so stupid is that even if there were as many gay people as there were Southern evangelicals, this was a really stupid move because now all they've done is tick off their base and tried to appease people that are never going to be appeased. It's never going to be enough. As soon as they did that, they're like, oh, well, they need to start giving money to gay organizations. Oh, well, if they're really serious, they're going to have a gay person on their board of directors. It just goes on and on and on. They're never going to let up. You can't reason with a mob. And Chick-fil-A should have been smart enough to figure that out by now. All they've done is tick off both sides. And as everybody here knows, and this is where I'll leave this, I have for a while now been a pretty big proponent of Chick-fil-A. I actually made a promise to my audience about 2 years ago that every single time Chick-fil-A winds up in the news and somebody is trying to attack them, that I would eat at Chick-fil-A, but I don't know that I ever shared this detail. The truth is, I don't like chicken. I don't. Ask any of my friends. Ask anybody that's known me for any number of time or gone out to eat with me. I don't eat chicken at all, period. The only time in the past 2 years that I have eaten chicken was to go to Chick-fil-A for the photo ops. And because I hated the way that they were being bullied, I hated the way that people were talking about them, I specifically, a person that does not eat chicken, went to Chick-fil-A and didn't just buy a drink or something or make a purchase just for the photo op. I genuinely wanted to support them with my money because I liked the way that they did business. I liked what they stood for. I own a Chick-fil-A shirt and I don't eat chicken. I bought the chicken sandwiches, I bought the nuggets, and they're not bad, but I'm a beef guy. I raised beef. I grew up around it. I'm a beef and pork guy, strictly. I'm just not a big chicken fan. Yet I was willing to do that specifically because of that. And not only did I go to the restaurant to support them, I gave them free publicity. You can take a look at this. These are different pictures from my social media over the past few months. I mean, you can see, and I apologize, I know that's a lot of Caleb in a short little space there, but I mean, you can check it out. You can see, and you'll also notice that a lot of these pictures, I'm eating breakfast biscuits instead, and I'm not eating one of the chicken ones because, again, you didn't know this at the time, but I actually don't like chicken. And so there's very few of them. I started going in the mornings just so I could order something and still support them, but also not have to eat chicken because I just don't like the chicken. That's the level of dedication that people like me, that have my worldview, were willing to give you, Chick-fil-A. And now, you've just thrown all that away. And done it for a very small portion of the population that's never going to accept you anyway. This was one of the dumbest decisions that you could have made, even if you take the morality out of it. From a business perspective, it's one of the worst moves I've ever seen. And this is going to significantly hurt Chick-fil-A's bottom line. I don't know that if it's going to be immediate, and who knows, they may actually wind up bouncing back and being stronger than ever. I mean, McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and all the other ones, they don't have any moral stances on that, and people just go there because they like the food. I go there because I like the food. At Wendy's, not McDonald's. But my point in all this is you have lost the loyalty and support of people that really liked you and sometimes, went there when they could have gone somewhere else just because they like how you do business. I don't think that their business is going to evaporate or anything, but I can tell you this. Unless they reverse this decision, I don't intend to ever go back to a Chick-fil-A. And I don't really see that as a boycott because the only reason I was going there in the first place was because of their moral decisions that had nothing to do with the product. Because if you give me a choice between chicken and pretty much anything else, I'm going to go with anything else. Just about every time. I never have a craving for chicken. I went there only because of their stances on things. And I gave them all kinds of free advertising, free publicity, which, keep in mind, it's my job to get paid for things like that. Still did it for free. I think that they have made a massive miscalculation here. And I think this is a very apt place to work in one of my favorite movie quotes of all time by Two-Face in The Dark Knight. You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain. I think that's what happened with Chick-fil-A. They had been on top for a little too long. They started really liking it up there and were afraid that that could go away. They were afraid that if they didn't give up their moral principles, that they were going to wind up losing what they had accomplished. And unfortunately, they decided to cave. Let's go to the chaplain's report.
In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Chaplain Corps. Under the command of General George Washington, each soldier was required to attend worship service every Sunday. While other armies advanced on their feet, Washington's troops advanced on their knees. It's time for the Chaplain's Report with Caleb Colquitt on tactics.
Chaplain's report today comes from the book of James. And I really did want to set this one up because I do think it requires a little bit of context. So what's happening here is that James is rebuking the Christians that he's writing to, the 12 lost tribes of Israel. He is describing to them the reason that they are no longer in God's favor. And basically what it all boils down to is pride. That they unfortunately have given into their pride and into their own arrogance. And this is really where he gives an example of it. It's not something that we would think of as big. It's not something that we, with human eyes, with an earthly standpoint, would look at and it's like, oh, that really is a big problem. They really shouldn't be doing that. He said one of the indications of their pride is that they will say, well, tomorrow we're going to do this. Instead of saying, if the Lord wills it, then we will do this. That seems like such a little thing to us. But the reason it's significant, the reason it's important, and the reason that James is emphasizing it is because it does what? It puts you in the driver's seat, not God. It's suggesting that you are in control of your own destiny, not God. And that's why he's saying what we should be saying is, if the Lord wills it. It wasn't so much about the expression itself, even though I think that was part of it. Primarily what James is speaking to is, why is it that you aren't thinking of it in terms, your heart and your soul do not think about things in terms of, well, if God permits it, then we will do this. See, it's wrong worldview. Even somebody that's trying to do the right thing, even somebody that is trying to live a good Christian godly life, is going to be led astray by their own pride if they don't think in terms of, well, if God allows me to do something, then I will do it. You see, it's a tiny shift in worldview that makes a world of difference. And that's really what James is talking about here. And we start out in James 4:16 and 17, right after this passage, where he says, "But as it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. Therefore, to one who knows the right thing to do and does not do it, to him it is sin." Now, there's a couple things that I want to dispel here when it comes to misunderstandings of this passage. First of all, what God is not doing, he is not excusing the ignorant and holding them guiltless. To somebody that doesn't know the gospel, who doesn't know what the right thing to do is or hasn't been taught it, it's true that that person is not held to as high a standard, but it does not mean that their sins are not still going to separate them from God. It doesn't mean that not having a relationship with Jesus is still going to be enough to keep them out of the kingdom of heaven, because it is. That's what we're told in the scripture. What it is doing is emphasizing that God does expect more out of us. One thing that I was constantly frustrated with as a kid, because I have a younger brother, and he's not just a little younger than me, he's a lot younger than me. 8 years. Which really doesn't seem like that much now, but believe me, it was like an eternity when we were kids. I was a lot older than my little brother. And because of that, I was a preteen when he was still a toddler. I mean, maybe a little above toddler, but you know what I'm saying. He's a little kid. And he would do something. And Dad and I would respond to it or react to it and basically do the same in kind. And Dad would get upset with me. And I would notice he would fuss at me a lot more than he would fuss at Levi. And that's something that, because I am a very fair-minded person and because I was a child at the time and didn't understand the difference, I was constantly frustrated by. And Dad was, and I realize he was right now, but Dad used to look back at me as like, son, I expect more out of you. You're 14 or 15 or whatever age I was when I did something. It's like, he's a little kid. You're almost a man. I expect more out of you. Why was that fair? Because I was older, I was more mature, and I should have known better. Now, should my little brother have known better too? Yeah, he should have. But the point is, I for sure should have known better. And he excused a little bit more out of my younger brother because, well, in a lot of ways, he didn't know better, or he didn't know, he had not been instructed as often as I had. That may be a good way to put it. See, my dad was still mad at my little brother. He was more mad at me, and that's how God is with us. Does sin still upset him when it's somebody that hasn't been taught better or doesn't know the Bible? Yeah, still upsets him. Still wrong. Still a separation between him and his child. But it's not as egregious as somebody who knows the scripture, knows what the right thing to do is, and just flat does it anyway. The reason that's more egregious is because he knows that we know the right thing to do. And so it's not that the sin is worse. It's more like we've done a double sin. Because to somebody who doesn't believe in God and doesn't really understand why lying is commanded not to be done, they may lie and actually think they're doing the right thing. Is the lie still wrong? Yeah. But it's more wrong for a Christian to do it because not only is he lying, he's also defying God and knows he's doing it while he's doing it. That's the difference. And it actually goes back to something that we've been talking about today, because you can look at examples of this all throughout the scripture. You can look at Jesus. He held the Pharisees to a higher standard than the people around them. Why? Because they were supposed to know better. They were supposed to be the arbiters of God's word. They were supposed to be the protectors of the Torah and God's law. And they were failing miserably. And so, yeah, he was a little harsher on them. But he was doing so because he knew that they knew better. He knew that they knew they were screwing up. The other people, they maybe just didn't know. And so Jesus corrected them a little more gently. We see what happened with Paul at Athens. Paul even says in that sermon, at this time of ignorance, God looked the other way. But now that his son has come and the gospel is being preached, he's commanding all men everywhere to be baptized. You see, before the Gentiles were not held to the same standard as the Jews. Now we are, because Jesus has come and the gospel is for all. Now that that standard has gone across all of humanity, God expects more out of us. Because now we're partakers in the law too. We're partakers in Abraham's seed. And so because of that, I think that's the reason, the primary reason why we did this whole story earlier and I was so disappointed in Chick-fil-A. As much as it bothers me that there's a rainbow Whopper or that companies like Target have a Gay Pride Month display, yeah, it bothers me. But the reason that this hacks me off so much with Chick-fil-A, even though what they're doing isn't considered as bad on its surface as those companies, is because they're supposed to know better. I'm not trying to put them on a pedestal or say that, because like I said, I expected them a few years down the road to do exactly this. I just didn't think it would happen this quickly. But the reason I'm disappointed in them is because I don't expect those other companies to act like a Christian organization. I do expect it out of Chick-fil-A, and that's the difference. But more importantly, I think that acts as a sobering warning to all of us about the serious dangers of living in the world and living as the rest of the world. Just like Chick-fil-A caved in the face of enormous pressure, we can do the same thing as Christians, and often do. That's why it's so important to stand fast and hold on to that which is good. Because God expects more out of us. He expects more out of us because we have been given His word, we've been given it abundantly, and because of that, especially as we mature in the faith, God expects us to be His messengers. He expects us to act better than those that are outside of His kingdom, because if we act like everybody else in the world, then what was the point of building a kingdom anyway? We are cast out of the kingdom at that point because we really don't belong to His Son. We belong to the world. And that ought to be a terrifying thought to everybody in the kingdom. We have to hold fast to that which is good and denounce that which is evil, because God expects that out of us. And when we do not meet God's expectations, there are always consequences. Stay the course, friends.
Tactics is a production of News Radio 1440 and Cumulus Media Montgomery. Any opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Cumulus Media. The theme song for Tactics is 6 Foot Town by Big and Rich. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Broadcast studios provided by Cumulus Media Montgomery. Location studios provided by the Dalraida Church of Christ. Copyright 2019.